So there's something that I don't think anyone has talked about yet, and that's that the veil is unnatural. Welcome to Cryptid Theory, Tormentic here, and today we're going to talk a little bit about the veil and why I think it was unnatural. Alright, so first off, we've been looking at the veil as a noun, and I think we need to look at it more as a verb, and I actually went and got the definition. It's to cover, provide, obscure, or conceal with or as if with a veil. Now, the only real description of the veil that we have is at the very beginning of chapter 1, and it's when injured cold basically breaks free. And it reads, "The space immediately around the man's arm then appeared to flex or bend for a brief moment, and the air just above his outstretched hand rippled as though there was a fine film resting on it, oily and slick to the touch." So that's the only description we actually have of what the veil was. Now, they do actually explain in the comics that other barriers were put in place around certain cities, like Unity City, Point Pleasant, and they kind of seem to share a lot of the same characteristics, like a oily, slick to the touch, reflective, if you will, almost slightly transparent in places. But we don't really have much info exactly on what the veil is made of. Now, in MetaZoo, what the veil was, it was literally the thing, if you will, that separated magic from the rest of humanity. You can't think of it as a barrier, think of it more as a worldwide bubble. That pretty much, that's the way I've kind of come to grips with it. Worldwide bubble that surrounded the entirety of the planet. Now, the reason why I say the veil was unnatural is, if you go back and actually look at the lore, the veil's only been around for about 1,000 years. So that means that humanity had existed for thousands of years before the veil was put into place. Going into the comics, you can see that Indrid Cold actually breaks free of the veil in 1966. So with the veil actually completely shattering in 2021, that gives us a rough date that the veil was put in place somewhere between 1066 AD and 1121 AD. I started looking at some civilizations and other stuff like that, and between 1150 BC and I even went as far as the 1330s AD, there was a lot of civilizations, big civilizations, that actually fell. In 1150 BC, that was the late Bronze Age collapse, where civilizations all across the Middle East, Greece, that area, they just collapsed, and not entirely sure why. A lot of people think it might have been because of famine and drought, but they just mysteriously, all of them, stopped. It might be one of the reasons why Angkor couldn't have kept the floodwaters actually from their city, and it ended up being flooded, because before the veil was put in place, they were able to use magic. Afterwards, they weren't. It could have also been part of the reason why the Mayans actually ceased to exist at 950 AD. The Tiwanaku civilization in 11,000 AD. The Akusumite Empire in Ethiopia, they collapsed in 1000 AD. The Vedic civilization in India, it collapsed in 500 BC. There's a lot of big civilizations that collapsed if you look between about a 2,000 year period, like I said, from 1150 BC to about 1000 AD. I would also even go as far as to say as the Dark Ages, which happened in 1330, could potentially have been caused because of the veil being put in place, because people were cut off from the magic, from other stuff that they had learned hundreds of years ago. Like, I think that when the veil was put in place, it literally led to a partial downfall of humanity. We lost a lot of information, we lost a lot of power, we lost a lot of healing ability, things of that nature, just because we were cut off from literally everything. And it's something else too with the release of UFO that got me thinking about this, because UFO is all about aliens. There's actually one that MetaZoo tweeted out, and it's just called UFO, but it reads, "There are many UFOs that dot the sky in Cryptid Nation and beyond, but this class of UFOs works closely with MIB in order to protect those alien beasties that casters seek to contract." That means that human casters can contract aliens if they find them in Cryptid Nation now, which that's one of the reasons why the veil, I think, actually existed, was to separate humanity from everything else, not just magic, but everything else. One of the reasons why we've been able to actually have some sort of reports of some of these cryptids, like Bigfoot, other things like that, is because there were ones that existed before the veil actually was put in place. And this is going to go into another theory, which I will get into later. But I feel that there were certain beings left, either by accident or on purpose, on the other side of the veil that separated everything from humanity. And there's the reason why we don't get any good pictures or photos or video or anything, like Bigfoot, for example, is because that veil existed. It obscured our ability to be able to see it. It's why out of the 7 billion people on the planet, let's say roughly maybe 500 at most have really seen Bigfoot. That's a huge number. 99% of all magic, of all cryptids, of everything was sealed away from humanity. That's what happened when they put in the veil. Now, thinking about that, the only reason why I can come up with that they would actually put a veil in place is because it was a nuclear option. It was a last resort. The Evergreens and whoever helped them did it in order to either protect humanity or protect humanity from doing something to something else. And we've always been assuming that Indrid Cold was the one that actually brought the destruction of the veil. I don't think he did, because he would have actually broken the veil back in 1966 and not waited an additional almost 60 years in order to make the veil shatter. I think he was just one of the ones that was left purposely on the other side of the veil. Now remember, not all of the casters, the Evergreen casters specifically, were locked out of the humanity side of the veil. The comics clearly state that some of them lived amongst us, immortal. Their magic's diminished. Like, they still had some magic, but it was nowhere near what they were capable of when they were actually open to the source, if you will, with the veil being shattered. Now, the really crazy thing is, though, I feel that humans are cryptids too. Because the big question you have to ask yourself is, where are all the animals in Cryptid Nation? I have not seen any animal illustrated, mentioned in the comic, in anything. That brings me to the next theory. Where did all the animals go? So I guess in summary, this theory is that the veil is unnatural, and because of it being put in place, it actually led to the downfall of humanity for a brief time. Hundreds of civilizations collapsed, information was lost, it led to eventually to the Dark Ages, and it also fundamentally, in my opinion, changed humans and animals. But we'll get into that next time.